Hello and welcome to this episode of the Outdoors Adventure Podcast. And finally, looks like we're getting out of winter and getting into spring. So hopefully everyone's making lots of plans to be getting outdoors and enjoying the warmer weather and the longer hours. I don't know about you guys, but it feels like it's been possibly the longest winter of my life. It just feels like it's been dark and cold, isn't it, forever? And when we just sort of seemed like we were just getting out of it not so long ago, we had another really cold snap, didn't we? And then March has been a complete washout. So hopefully get moving into April, we are going to be moving into better conditions to be enjoying the outdoors in. In this episode, we have the second part to Alex Staniforth's interview, where, oh, by the way, I think I got that wrong last month. At the end of last month's podcast, I think I said we've got an interview with Johnny Walker, mountain leader, so I do apologise for that. That'll be next time. So yeah, sorry, this time we have Alex Staniforth, and the second part of the interview. Last month we heard more about his Everest expeditions and how he got into the outdoors. This month we're going to be looking at more to do here with his UK work, his charity work, and his inspiration going forwards. We've got a trip report from Orrest Head in the Lake District, which was the first hill that Wainwright climbed and gave him his inspiration to explore the outdoors more and eventually write his Wainwright guides. We've got the news, events, and a new question of the month too. So we're going to crack straight on with the second part of the interview from Alex Staniforth. If you didn't listen to the first part of the interview, then I do recommend you going back and listen to the last podcast, which has the first part of his interview and covers his Himalayan expeditions, how he got into the outdoors, and the disasters on Everest. We start this part of the interview having just left him talking about those disasters on Everest and how the mental trauma was affecting him and his plans on how to get over it, basically. So in this episode, we talk more about how he got more into charity work, especially those who were affected in Nepal, and more of his UK-based work, his charity group, and his inspiration for everything going forwards. I mean, this pales into insignificance about the experiences that you've had, but the only traumatic thing really that's ever happened in my life was I was crossing the road and I saw two young girls who were 12 and 14 years old get hit by a car. I was there first on scene. They died in front of me, essentially. And I do wonder whether a traumatic experience like that does rewire your brain in some way, because although it's obviously not to the extent of what you've experienced, I still think about it. And it was 13-14 years ago, I'd say. It's a long time ago. And you do still think about a traumatic incident. So I do wonder whether there's something we don't understand, which is where obviously mental health issues have grown so much in the last 10-15 years, and the understanding has grown so much.
Yeah, and that must be a horrific thing on so many levels in a different way. You know, I think everything is significant to people in their own ways. And I don't know the answer to that. I mean, you know, I don't think you can ever truly forget these things. I think they become part of you. But it's like how they control you is the important thing. And you know, I think with that, I mean, it reminds me of an incident last summer, you know, when I was paragliding and, you know, and sadly, you know, there was another student who suddenly passed away on us. And whenever I hear of any incidents, whenever I see an air ambulance, whenever I see an ambulance now, it gets me. Sometimes it can have me in tears, you know. And yeah, you hear a lot about that, and people can obviously be triggered by that, and it can lead to some very unhealthy coping strategies. So it's something that's really important that we do talk about. You know, there is help for it. I think I just try to pretend, like every other challenge, I'm okay, I can get on with it, and I was ready.
Yeah. So you've been on your Himalayan expeditions. Obviously, it's been disasters, and you've come back and you're struggling at this point. But you really have thrown yourself into the fundraising that you mentioned that really helped you through these challenging times. What was the first sort of fundraising event that you did? Was it the I want to say the 100 county tops, but it wasn't, was it? It was running the Three Peaks.
The first fundraiser was actually my very, very first challenge, which was, well, actually, it was a 10K race when I was about 15. My first ever race, and I think I raised about 70 quid. And then I did the Three Peaks when I was 16. I kind of did all the mountains solo. My stepdad drove me. And I think that was when the kind of penny dropped around fundraising as well. This is an amazing thing to do, to be able to actually challenge myself and to help other people at the same time. So that's always been part of the process. It adds a real meaning to doing these silly things when you can do some good at the same time. So yeah, there's, in terms of the big fundraisers, I mean, both Everest trips were a fundraiser as well. And then after Everest, I then started to try and raise money for people in Nepal by doing a few smaller challenges and speaking and various things like that. But the big ones were Climb the UK, which was in 2017. So after Cheoyu, I had this kind of light bulb moment again, where I kind of really started to question what was success all about, and came up with a challenge to climb to the highest point of all 100 counties in the UK by human power, so about 5,000 miles in 72 days. That raised about 25,000 for Young Minds, and then inspired by that, I then started a charity, Mind of the Mountains, in 2020. That has kind of become, in some ways, my legacy, but also that's been now the focus of all my fundraising. So all my challenges that since and in the future will be for our own charity, and we're all about trying to restore mental health through nature in the same way that it's always been my tool. So Climb the UK was the big one, but then the Three Peaks was probably the daftest challenge I've taken on. That was back in 2020, and I'm sure most people have heard of the National Three Peaks, climbing Ben Nevis, Scarford Pike and Snowdon in 24 hours, which doing that at 16 was hard enough. But I decided to try and run the entire distance between them. About 17 marathons, 450 odd miles in 9.5 days. Wouldn't recommend it, but that raised a good amount as well.
Yeah, I mean, for someone, I mean, I love hiking, I love camping, I love paddleboarding, I play squash. The one thing I've never been able to do is run. I just can't do it. I think it's the monotonous of it, and I don't know, it's just something I can never get on board with.
It's strange. I mean, it's probably the only sport that I had any natural ability. I'm hopeless at everything else. Well, I'm pretty average at running as well, but I'm built for running and endurance. But put me in a gym and I'd rather put a fork in my eye. Honestly, I'm hopeless. But running seems to suit me, and I think I've now discovered that passion, and I think will now be the focus of my future challenges, I think.
So the county tops one's an interesting one, because I think, has anyone done that before, or it's one that's, have they? I'm
always looking for that sweet spot between, something that's kind of new or not very kind of well known. Something there I can kind of put my own twist on it, but also I'm always trying to look for a fastest time or something that is recognisable, because that's what raises money. And a guy called Johnny Muir had done it in a similar human-powered style. A lot of people have done it where they've kind of ticked them off over a number of months or years, but in a continuous endurance effort. The only one I knew of was Johnny Muir, who wrote a book. He wrote a book about it, actually, and Johnny's been a great support, and I helped him his recent book called The Mountains Are Calling, which is a fantastic read, because Johnny is also now a Scottish Hildener, and so he was my inspiration. He was the only real he was the only example I had to follow, really. So I had to do a lot of the research, because trying to define a county top in 4 countries is, that was the hardest part, trying to actually plan the route. But it was great, because it was actually the first time when it was simply a matter of my mental and physical ability to keep on going. I didn't have to worry about avalanches or Sherpas or earthquakes. It was just the first time when I actually was able to achieve something I set out to do, and actually to see and appreciate what we have in the UK, which a lot of people have never really appreciated, and I certainly hadn't until this. You might think there's not there's not a lot of mountains in Norfolk or, in Kent. I mean, I think the highest point of Kent was in an old lady's back garden. Then you've got the big kind of big hills in Scotland. You've got all the Munros and the mountains in Snowdonia and the Brecon Beacons and Northern Ireland, and it was a great journey.
I can imagine. I must say, it's one of I've thought about doing it as well, the county tops, but simply because of my job. So I drive all over the UK with my job, and so sometimes I try and incorporate the outdoors if I can into my job. I go for a quick walk, or in fact, yesterday I popped into the camping show at the NEC. Always just an hour here or there when I'm driving around the UK. And I thought I could probably do that actually, but I get what you mean about the differentiation between what's a county top, and then there's all different types of county tops and stuff. I've never been able to get my head around it, to be honest with you.
I had a message from a friend this week saying I've just been up to the highest points of Wiltshire, and I am convinced that it's actually in the middle of the farmer's field. And I was like, that's the thing. When I was there, I was literally on the phone to BBC Radio Wiltshire in the middle of this farmer's field, like up to my knees in peas and trying to find this tiny cairn, and that was it. I had to hope for the best and hope I found the highest point sometime. But then you've got the contrast to the wild parts of Scotland and the coastline and Cornwall. It was just, it was fantastic.
No, I can imagine. I think we sort of don't appreciate what's on your own doorstep sometimes, do you? You sort of look at the wider world and think, wow, look at those big mountains in the Himalayas or the wilderness in Canada. But actually, if you look closer to home, you can find adventure as well, can't you?
Yeah. I moved in just at the start of 2019. I moved up north. Speech on that. I moved, for that reason, to the South Lakes, just to be surrounded by that, because, in my opinion, the lakes is one of the most beautiful parts of the world, and I've been here for nearly 4 years, and I think there's a lifetime of exploring to do just here, never mind anywhere else, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, we do a question of the month segment on the podcast, and the question of the month this month is, what's your favourite UK national park and why? And I mean, spoiler alert, the Lake District is mine as well. There's something about it. I think it's sort of got everything for you, really, hasn't it? I mean, you mentioned earlier the Mind Over Mountains mental health charity that you set up. It's a common thing that we often talk about in the interview segments in the podcast. The mental health aspect of the outdoors seems to always come up. I think it's because obviously our understanding of mental health issues are so much more apparent these days than they were even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And the benefits to the outdoors and how that affects your mental health, it's extraordinary, really. I mean, the research that's coming out every week, it seems like there's a new paper that comes out that says the benefits to the outdoors and how it affects your mental health. So tell us a little bit about how that came about. How did the Mind Over Mountains come about?
I mean, I never really spoke about my challenges for a long time. Anxiety throughout my life, but then depression the first time when I was sort of 15 or 16. I think eating disorders were kind of correlating to that when I was around 16, when I had that injury, and then never really went away. So I was kind of managing the peaks and the troughs with the outdoors, and I was they were there, but I was in a better place with them most of the time. So they've always been there. And I guess the outdoors has been my antidepressant. So as long as I can get outside and be active, I can generally manage them fairly well. But I never spoke about it. I think because I was this athlete, I was this adventurer, I kind of had this image in my head of being kind of mentally tough, etc. And I guess I was terrified of that sort of shame and stigma. And when I did start talking about it, I read about a guy called Tom Fairbrother in The Guardian, who was an elite marathon runner, and he spoke about his bulimia, and it made me think, well, actually, it's safe for me to talk about it as well. And when I did, people started to put their hand up and talk about it, and you create this kind of positive multiplier effect just by having that safe space. And I kind of thought, I have to be a role model for people. I have to show that side as well, because it may help them, And so because of that, I was then invited to lead an event after the Climb the UK Challenge and the County Tops. I was invited to lead this thing around trying to promote the benefits of hill walking for mental health in the Lake District with a group called Adventure Recovered. So I think because of what I've just done, they wanted me to kind of be an ambassador for that thing. But wanted to make it so much more than just about walking in the hills, because we all know you go into the you go for a walk one day or for a weekend away and you feel great, but then you come back and then you kind of got that up and down effect. And I think well-being is about having positive habits. It's about regular actions, not just one-off tick boxes, and giving people the tools to manage that. So I brought in a friend, Chris, who's a coach. We can combine the walking with coaching and mindfulness, inspirational speakers and counselling, just giving people that safe space to walk and talk. And we were blown away by the combination of that, that kind of not only walking and being outside, but being in a like-minded group, having that, professional well-being support there. And that weekend was the catalyst for obviously what is now the charity. We've obviously evolved very quickly in that time, having to adapt in the pandemic for one of them. And we've now delivered not only the kind of weekend retreats like those, but also kind of one-day walks. So it's the same model, but just in a one-day event. And we've been working in all regions across, across England and Wales. We've done events for the NHS, for the police, for the ambulance service, as well as people over 18 in the general public, with all people across the mental health spectrum. And that has kind of become the full-time job as well as my day job, which is speaking, and I think it's tapping into a need and a demand. And last year we did 27 events for nearly 300 people. I won us, and I think we have that potential to be, the national, kind of charity who provide these experiences. I think when the demand for mental health support has never been so big, I think this is one of the most powerful tools we have to try and fill the gap. So that's how it came about, and we've just recently hired a CEO, Ian, who's taken over, which is fantastic. He'll be able to take us to that next level. And my job can be to do silly things and raise money for us.
Sounds amazing. I mean, again, there's a common theme, I think, with everything that you do that sets you apart from others, in the sense that I think we all understand the benefits that the outdoors has to people's mental health. But you've taken it that one step further, haven't you? And you've set up a charity, and like you say, you're helping hundreds of people benefit with the outdoors, which is it's fantastic. So I'm sure that there's a lot of people that would thank you for setting that up.
It's not for me. I mean, it's more for the team. I mean, crikey, we've now got over 50 freelance staff. We've got a brilliant team of trustees and our core team who are so dedicated to this, and I think it's about building a great team around you. So it's all down to them, really. The fact that we've not only survived but grown in the pandemic is credit to all them, and it's a pleasure to see it unfold. I know we have a lot of space to grow and improve. We're not saying it's a miracle cure, but I think it's something that can help a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned just then that your sort of day job now is speaking. So you do motivational speaking now, do you?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's not a sort of when you're at school, being a speaker and an outdoors adventurer is never kind of on the typical job titles. But I kind of fell into it after Everest, and despite having a lifelong stammer, speaking has now become my main work. Speaking a lot, in corporates and organisations and schools as well, talking about resilience, mental health, help people to, overcome their challenges and achieve their potential, whatever their Everest may be. Obviously, it may not be mountains, it could be business stress, change, uncertainty, but trying to share what I've learned from the outdoors and from Everest into a daily context. So, best job in the world, when it's busy. Had the chance to share the story with a lot of great people, and as the charity is now in Ian's hands, I'm looking to also do more of that, really. But it works pretty well. Kind of the adventures fuel that journey and fuel the content, and I hope I can be doing that for many years to come, really, because being able to hopefully make an impact on people as a living is just a dream.
Yeah, I suppose it's a frightening prospect for quite a few people, just standing up in a room and talking to people. And like I say, especially if you've got a stammer, it's not going to be the easiest thing to do. But it sounds like you're doing well doing that as well. So you mentioned these silly challenges, in your words, to raise money. Have you got any others coming up that you've sort of dreamt up or Any others you planning on doing?
I've not been everywhere, but it's on my list. So interesting. I mean, the last sort of 10, 11 months at the time of recording, I've been on a bit of a different journey. So in April last year, I did the Lakes Mears Waters, which is a 105-mile run around the lakes, touching all 27 of the Lakes Mears Waters in the national park. And that was my first 100-miler. And unfortunately, 2 days later, I caught COVID. I wouldn't recommend the combination, but I've now been dealing with kind of long COVID ever since, and it's been undoubtedly the worst and most challenging time of my life, because I've not had all that outdoor stuff taken away from me, and with no real time scale or process, or often quite a lot of kind of hopelessness as to whether I'll ever improve. I've taken control of that this year, and I do seem to have a bit of a plan B and a bit of progress now. I'm trying to essentially retrain my body to cope, but I had to bin pretty much all my challenges last year, just to try and give this the time it's needed, and build some more mental health tools while I've not been able to do these things. So I did manage to take up last summer. I was in the open water, so I was doing a lot of open water swims, and luckily in the lakes, I'm in the best place for that.
Yeah.
Something that didn't kind of trigger my symptoms, so I was able to start that, and I have a few plans. I mean, one that I can share, I'm not going to set a time because I can't put dates on things yet, is the Frog Graham Round, which is a lot of people may have
very well known. Yeah,
the Frog Graham is 40 miles of running, but you swim 4 lakes in between, and that feels like for me a good way to combine my running, which is what I know best, with this new thing of swimming and being in the lakes, and providing all goes well health wise, that'll be my comeback challenge. And looking at an expedition to a big mountain later this year. There is plans for more long-term endurance things, but it's finding a balance. And obviously, being self-employed, if I'm away for 2 or 3 months, it's really difficult. And I don't want to set myself back health-wise. So I've been back in the pool recently because it's too cold to be outside. I'm not brave enough for that. I do admire the people that do, but I can't comprehend swimming in the lakes now. And I'm on a couch at 5K, trying to kind of rebuild back up. So right now, that's my challenge. Is back, I guess.
Oh, okay. I mean, I'm sorry to hear about the long COVID and the setbacks, but I mean, I suppose the story that you've given us, the setbacks you've had over years, I'm sure you've got it in you to get that Bob Graham round completed. I'll be following you to get any updates. So we always finish the interviews with a question. I feel a bit silly asking you this question, really, because you've done so much that you could tell us. But I suppose it's your opportunity to perhaps give us a snippet that you perhaps don't tell many people. The question is what's the one thing about you that when you tell them always surprises people? There's probably quite a lot you could give.
Yeah, there is a lot I could give, but no, it's a great question. And it's, it's all on the table. I'm not sure anything. I think it would be that actually I am never satisfied with what I've done. Like, you're very kind in saying I've done a lot, but I'm definitely a perfectionist, and I don't feel I've done anywhere near enough, and I don't feel I've achieved enough. I don't know whether that's stemming from the bullying from childhood or what, but there is so much more that I want to do. I think people are quite surprised by that. They say, "Oh, you've done so much," but for me, it's irrelevant. So I'd probably say that. And if I can, here we go. I said there's so much more I could say. I think as well, just confidence is something that people think I have a lot of confidence, and say, "Oh, you must be really brave to be able to do all these things." But I would say confidence is very situational. As you say, I'm in my element on a stage in front of 200 people, or being on a mountain in a storm, getting soaked in cold and battered by the wind. I love that stuff. But put me in a bar full of strangers, or to go and ask for something in the shop, and honestly, I'd rather run a mile. So people don't respect that, because confidence is very situational. So there's 2 things anyway.
No, I mean, you're definitely right in what you say, because I suppose when I read your brief CV at the beginning, that's enough to cover a lifetime. And you've done it in 27 years. And so to say that you're sort of never satisfied and you're always looking at the next step it is surprising, but I can sort of understand by the psyche that you've given us today. So, I mean, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and giving us your story. It really is insightful, and I hope it's provided a lot of inspiration for anyone listening. If anyone wants to, you say you've got 2 books, you do speaking. If anyone wants to sort of get in touch or find out a bit more about you, where's the best place to head?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And again, thank you for the chance to be here and tell the story. And I hope, it's helpful for, for people and their own challenges as well. Best place to find me is my site, alexstaniforth.com. You can find all the links to the books, to speaking, to all my social media on there. The main place I'm on is Instagram, which is just my name with an underscore. Always happy to help and answer anything. If people have any questions, feel free to drop me an email or a DM. I'd be really happy to hear from you, and hope you wanted to follow the journey as well. And the charity is also linked on my site. So if you or anybody who you know is struggling, maybe needs a bit of time out, a bit of time chance to walk and talk, have a look on there for our next events as well. But I'd be really happy to help in any way I can.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'll be putting all the links to everything in the show notes as well. So if you do want to find the links to them, just click on the show notes. Alex, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So don't forget, our question of the month this month is all about what you enjoy doing in the outdoors. I want to know more about what your favourite activity is. Is it walking? Is it climbing? Is it wild camping? Is it bodding? Is it paddleboarding, kayaking, ice climbing? You get my drift. Exactly what it is you enjoy in the outdoors and why you like enjoying that in the outdoors. You can answer in 3 ways. You can either email me at outdoorsadventurepodcast@hotmail.com, or you can go to the Facebook group and you'll find the link to comment on there, and there's also a Twitter feed going at the Outdoors Pod. So today's trip report, this episode's trip report, comes from Orrest Head in Windermere, the Lake District. It's not exactly the biggest hill you're ever going to do in your life, but it's quite an iconic one in the sense that it's the first one that Wainwright climbed when he first came to the Lake District, and it gave him his inspiration behind exploring the Lake District for Ellesmere. And I've never done it, and I've completed the Wainwright, and I've done about 75% of the outlying fells, and so I thought, well, I've got a spare hour in Windermere and that's all it takes, so I thought I should do it. And I've started to walk, and the first thing I've got to do on the walk, unfortunately, is walk past some amazing houses. And you look at them and think, oh, it's an amazing house in the lake. So Wainwright actually wrote of Orrest Head in his pictorial guides. He wrote, "Orrest Head, for many of us, is where we came in. Our first descent in Lakeland, our first sight of mountains in tumultuous array across glittering waters, of awakening to beauty. It's a popular walk, deservedly, for here the promised land is seen in all its glory. It's a fitting finale to a life made happy, be fell wandering." So I'm looking forward to getting to the top after reading that. It's a gorgeous day today. It's one of those days. I've got an hour free with work. I'd rather have a day free. Don't really get many days like this wandering the fells. So we're just still walking through these woods, and it's just a bit of a short, sharp climb up by the looks of things. It's getting my heart racing, but it's nothing over the top, nothing too spectacular. I mean, let's be honest, I'm not doing a trip report from the Himalayas, am I? It's a 20-minute stroll from the road. You can tell I was a bit short of time this month. There is something I don't remember ever when I was a kid. Maybe I never noticed it, but it's spring now. Spring has sprung. Things are starting to grow, and there's some wild garlic in these woods. Everywhere you seem to go these days, there's wild garlic. I don't remember that when I was a kid. Has it been around forever? Or has it just spread recently? I don't know. I might start looking into that. I spoke too soon. Short, sharp climb up. Well, I am following the less friendly route, but still, I've got to a split in the path where you can follow it round to the right, and you can go the more wheelchair friendly route, or I've decided to go straight up, and it's a bit of a sharp climb up. They've put steps in place to help you, but I suppose with it being a 20-minute stroll and off the road, I wasn't really expecting to get my heart racing as much as it is. But to be honest with you, I've been walking 10 minutes and nearly at the top, so can't complain. So it's just occurred to me, I could do this from my back garden. I could pretend I'm out of breath, walking around my back garden. I'm too honest. Well, it just goes to show that I don't ever fake anything on the podcast. Well, I've never thought of that before. I mean, I suppose it gives me an excuse to get out, doesn't it? The views are starting to open up, just coming out of the woods now. So I suppose it makes it worthwhile. And it's somewhere I've not been before. So, yeah, I'm sure you'd be able to tell if I was doing it from my garden. Trust me, that will never happen. So, made it to the top, and it took all of 17 minutes. I thought I'd time it. It seems a bit fast. Last month I did the Nantley Ridge, which is obviously a full day, full mountaineering, scrambly, 8-hour trek. And this month I'm doing a 20-minute stroll, but I suppose it goes to show the variety that I bring you. And it's busy, as you would expect. It's half term, it's nice weather. The top is packed full of tourists, and there's a plaque up there, and it's got a quote from Wainwright saying the few hours that I spent on Orrest Head cast a spell that changed my life forever. And it's quite a nice little saying, really. I think we've all had that moment perhaps in the fells where we've had a day or a few hours that's really inspired you to carry on fell walking or climbing or kayaking or whatever your chosen activity is. And the Lake District is special to me. I think I've said before that it has everything for me. It's my favourite national park. I've completed the Wainwrights, and it's quite special coming up here, I suppose, actually, considering this is where Wainwright got his inspiration from to write his 7 pictorial guides. There's a map up there which goes to show, it shows all of the hills you can see, as many viewpoints do. And yeah, you do get a really vast, expansive view of quite a lot of the Lakeland Fells, not so much the northern Lakeland Fells, because you've got the Fairfield Horseshoe in the way, and people places like Red Screes as well. And it's a full 360 view from here. You can see, I'll start off looking towards Yorkshire. Don't think you can see Whernside. No, there's a little outlying fell just in the way, or Ingleborough. And then you come round towards there's a couple of outlying fells. You can see, I want to say that's like Bowland sort of way, Forest of Bowland, I want to say. Round towards the town of Windermere. In the distance you've got Morecambe Bay. I'm pretty sure you can see Blackpool Tower I might be making that up. It's a bit hazy today, not the clearest of days. Someone can correct me on that. Coming on round, you've got the lower fells beyond Windermere, and then quickly hits you, you've got the Coniston range, 6-7 fells you can do over there. Coming around to Weatherlam, further round towards the crags, Crinkle Crag, which obviously is incredibly well known, and the Langdale Pikes, which is a pretty iconic view. Beyond that, you can see Scarfell Pike. And carry on round, Great Gable pokes its head out. Onto the lower fells above Ambleside and the Fairfield Horseshoe. Red Scree's pretty dominating, as it always is from this angle anyway. In fact, from most angles except for perhaps from Ambleside, Red Scree's always looks like quite a dominating mountain to me, a bit like what Great Gable does from most angles. Even from here, the fact that it's popping its head above any other fell apart from Scarfell Pike. Let's show the height of those two. And then I want to say Grey Crag. Grey Crag probably is the last one you can see before you get back to the Yorkshire Dales. So like I say, it's not going to be a full day out. It's not going to be an exciting scramble if that's what you're after. But for the sake of a 15-minute walk from the roadside, and I've parked in a 1-hour bay today, it's a leg stretch, isn't it? And it can be a fairly inspirational leg stretch. I mean, there's lots of kids up here, and I just like to think if it's the walk up here that gives them their inspiration for the love of the outdoors, then it doesn't have to be a full 8-hour trek, does it? You're still getting some inspiration into young people's minds. So I followed the quick track up. When I say that, I mean the more direct track, as you could tell from my heavy breathing earlier. And I think I'll follow the more leisurely track down back to the car, and unfortunately I've got more meetings this afternoon. So I've just left the top, a couple of musings on the way down. Musings? That's a word, isn't it? I want to say it's a word. Musings. Somebody who does a podcast, I've got such a strong link with the English language, haven't I? Strong grasp of it. I wonder if it would be that busy if it wasn't for Wainwright. I mean, it wouldn't be, would it? Let's be honest. But it sort of deserves to be, because it does pack its punch. Considering it's, well, I don't even know how high it is. I've not even looked, to be honest with you. It's tiny. It's a little bump on the broad scale of things in the Lake District. But it does pack its punch. It's got a fantastic view from the top. And deservedly, it's busy. And you can imagine why tourists like it so much. If you're not particularly into walking or climbing or hiking, it gives you all the viewpoints you get from higher fells, certainly. On a day like this particularly, it's an easy walk for the family, and it's a couple of hours out your day as opposed to a full day. A Google map tells me it could potentially be Blackpool Tower that you can see in the distance. It's doable on a clear day. I'm sure you'll be able to see it from here. Which goes to show the views you can get. I mean, 40 miles as a crow flies, probably, I want to say. I'll Google map measure it. Google Maps is your friend these days, isn't it? I'm taking the more leisurely path down. So save my knees a little bit, to be honest with you. So come to think of it, I'm wondering why it's not a Wainwright. I mean, the Wainwrights have gained popularity obviously over the years, and perhaps when Wainwright was writing his guidebooks, he didn't think it would be worthy. Perhaps he didn't realise the significance of the fell, because it wasn't significant at the time, only to him, not to anyone else. And obviously the popularity of the walks means it's significant to a lot of other people these days, but when you look at the likes of Latrig, it's similar. I mean, Latrig probably has the height advantage over Orrest Head, but you can park pretty much at the top. It's a 20-30 minute walk, but you can get a buggy up there. I think I'm pretty sure you can. It's got all the attributes to be a Wainwright. There's no height stipulation for a Wainwright, but it only makes the outline fells. Well, maybe that's sort of what Wainwright would have wanted, really. He was obviously a bit of an understated man, if you know anything about him. Perhaps he wouldn't have wanted it to be as busy, as popular as it is. Walking back down Ellery Woods through the slightly longer track, the more wheelchair, buggy-friendly track, it's got the obligatory couple of things that a lot of walks through the woods in the UK have these days. That is, number one, a statue of a Gruffalo. I don't know how many statues of Gruffalos there must be in woods across the UK, but I come across more and more. And a log with some coins in it. It's really hard to describe if you've not seen it before. I'm sure if you've been walking in the UK for any length of time, you've been through some woods and there's a log with a load of coins shoved in it. I'm going to look up what the history behind that is, because I'd be interested to know, actually. I've never really looked at the history. I've always just pointed it out to the kids when I'm walking with them. So I know I mention it every month, but I think it is quite important if people want to get more involved in the podcast. There's lots of ways you can do it, and everything I'm about to mention, you can find the links in the show notes. So it's quite an easy way to find the links to anything that you might want to get involved in. And a lot of people are getting involved in the show. I'm really delighted with how it's going, to be honest with you. It's, I did this as a hobby, and it's getting some really good listens. The last episode we did had the most amount of listens we ever had. And at one point we were in the top 13. We made it up to 13th in the wilderness section of the Apple podcasts. And we remain the third most listened to wilderness podcast in Finland, of all places. So, it's a bit of a strange one, but hey, we are getting a number of listens and it's getting some really good traction. Which just gives me a bit of motivation to keep going with it. So if you are enjoying it, please do get more involved. It really motivates me to do more, and I'm delighted with how it's going so far. You can email outdoorsadventurepodcast@hotmail.com, and I always welcome any feedback or any guest suggestions or anything positive or negative. I'd love to hear it. There's a Facebook group set up as well. If you just go to the show notes, the link will be in there. Or if you just go to Facebook and search for the Outdoors Adventure Podcast. The Twitter feed set up, a Twitter link set up, Twitter page. You can tell I don't use Twitter, can't you? I've no idea what I'm doing with it, really. But a lot of people read my posts when I put it on there. You can find that at the Outdoors Pods. And I've set up a TikTok as well. Now, those who know me in my personal life know how much I bloody love Twitter. I'm 37, I'm a bloke. I'm really not Twitter's target market, but I freaking love it. It's amazing. I have so much fun on there doing stupid videos and stuff. The podcast page has less stupid videos in it. Well, you might disagree if you go there, but you can find that again in the show notes, or just search for the Outdoors Adventure Podcast on TikTok. And then I always say it, but by far the best thing you can do if you want bigger, better, longer guests on, then rate and review. And it's really easy to do that on podcast apps such as Spotify and Apple. They make it really easy to review shows, rate shows, and to share the show as well with people who you think might be interested in listening to me blab on for an hour about stuff. In the news in the last couple of weeks, there's been a couple of bits of news, but the biggest bit was about the government's U-turn in the whole piece on trying to rediscover lost paths in the UK. Now, you might not have heard about this, but basically, obviously on OS maps, for example, there's a lot of rights of way, isn't there? Little, I think it's purple, orange. I can't remember what colour they are. Anyway, we all know what rights of way look like on an OS map, I'm sure. Well, apparently there used to be a lot more, and thousands of routes, about 41,000, they estimate, 41,000 miles of routes have been lost and are now part of private lands, and technically they should be rights of way. So there's a number of outdoors groups who, the Ramblers Association are leading it, who are trying to rediscover these lost routes. Now, there's so many of these routes that have been lost to private lands that they're concerned about how long it's going to take them, and there was a deadline set by the government for 2026. They were calling for an end to the deadline in its entirety, but the government I think they initially agreed to end the deadline, but they've now done a bit of a U-turn and they've put a deadline in for 2031. It sort of makes you wonder what the point of a deadline is. If they're lost paths and they're supposed to, and they should be rights away, it should just be an ongoing piece, shouldn't it? Is there any need for a deadline? I suppose if you're a landowner, you probably want a deadline. But if you're a landowner, you should also understand that they are rights away. So it's a bit of an unusual one. But yeah, I suppose that will sort of dwindle on. But the government have, at the moment, had put a deadline in place for 2031. It seems ages away, doesn't it? But the Ramblers Association are saying that there's still not going to be enough time to complete the project. So we are at risk of losing thousands of miles of paths that should be rights away, which I'm sure if you're into the outdoors is a bit of a concerning piece. The only other piece that I saw was on Facebook. I saw the Keswick Mountain Rescue Team quite scathing report on a couple of wild campers near Brown Cove Crags in the Lake District. And it says, with inadequate clothing and camping equipment, rain and strong winds meant the pair become increasingly wet and cold throughout the night. Shock horror. And they called 999 for help, and a small team were dispatched to take waterproofs and drinks and food and bring them down, basically. It only lasted an hour and a half, with 11 mountain rescue team leaders volunteering. A couple of points. I'm always of the opinion that the outdoors is there for everyone and everyone has to learn in their own way and all that sort of stuff. But one, it's cold, it's wet, go prepared. Two, you're at the base of Brown Cove Crags, which, I don't know, I've not been there for a number of years now, probably pushing 7 or 8 years the last time I was around that neck of the woods. But I don't seem to remember Brown Cove Crags being that far from the road. I really don't. I'm sure it's only about a half an hour walk from the road. I mean, the fact that it only took Mountain Rescue an hour and a half to pluck them off the hill goes to show how close to the road they were. I don't know. It's one of those where, yeah, I'm up for everyone to enjoy the outdoors, but you've got to be more prepared than that. And in fact, you know what? The comments on Facebook and online are a little bit 50-50. There is, they're not 50-50, but there is a bit of a split in the sense that some people are saying you've got to learn somehow. You know, we've all been amateurs and beginners at some point, and yes, the outdoor community can sometimes be a bit scathing on incidents like this. I think I'm going to join them in this case. I think I will, because, like I say, it's cold, it's wet, go prepared, you're not far from the road, you really shouldn't need rescuing. But fine, we don't understand the situation, we don't understand who they were, and there's probably more to the story than we're ever going to know, so perhaps let's not be too scathing of them. So, events-wise, what have we got coming up. There's quite a bit coming up now. Now we're moving out of winter into spring. There's more sort of outdoors festivals going on, and a few tours as well that are just about to start. There's a couple I've mentioned in the last couple of podcasts which are coming to a close. So for the last time, I will mention Gordon Buchanan and his tour. He's only got a couple of dates left from the moment this goes out. His tour will be ending sort of middle of April. Also, we've got James Ketchell as well. I've mentioned him a few times already. He's the only person on the planet to have climbed Everest, cycled around the world and rode an ocean, and he's still got a couple of tours, a couple of dates left. In fact, he goes through almost to the end of April. We also have, the Kendall Mountain Tour continues. I mean, that goes all the way through to the end of June, so I'll continue mentioning it because there are dates, and the dates between when this episode goes out and the next episode are, we've got one in London, one in Cardiff, Oban, and then we start moving into more further north in Scotland. We also have a number of outdoors festivals coming up. There is the Chepstow Walking Festival, which is from the 11th to the 16th of April. The Chepstow Walking Festival returns in 2023 to offer 6 days of hill walking, with many routes taking in the natural beauty of the Wye Valley. Apparently Chepstow is a walkers are welcome town. I don't know what makes you a walkers are welcome town. But there's various things going on in there, lots of free events up to sort of a £5 a person. And if you go to walksinchepstow.co.uk, you can find out more information there. And then there's also the Walk Scilly festival coming up, which guess where that is? In the Scilly Isles. Not the easiest place to get to in the world, is it? Let's be honest. I think you've either got to get a helicopter or a boat. I think they're the only two options. And half the time they're not running because of the weather by the sounds of it. But anyway, there's various events going on. And again, if you go to visitislesofscilly.com, you'll be able to find all the events there. And they suggest the cost is from about £10. And then towards the end of the month, we've got a couple of things going on, which I'll also mention next month in case we missed them. We've got the Outdoor Adventure Girls Snowdonia weekend, and the Outdoor Adventure Girls is a community providing safe and inclusive environments for women to reconnect with nature and the outdoors, and they're having a weekend trip to Snowdon with accommodation at the youth hostel Penny Pass. If you go to outdooradventuregirls.com, you can find all the information there. And lastly, there's the Kington Walk Spring Festival, which is in Herefordshire, and it's located near the Offers Dyke Path. And there's a walking festival going on there where they're taking in variable distances along the dramatic landscapes of local history, arts, natural history, and of course the excellent town and village pubs. So if you go to kingtonwalks.org, you can find all the information there. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Outdoors Adventure Podcast. If you enjoyed, please go to your app and rate, review and share with anyone you know who might enjoy the show. It does make a big difference to encourage future guests onto the show, so it's hugely appreciated. Next month we have a interview with Johnny Walker. We actually have it next month now. I'm sorry for messing that up last time. Next month, Johnny Walker, who has a fairly inspirational story about how he got the outdoors to be more wider part of his life. He's a successful mountain guide in the UK and across the world, and he shares his story. We also have a trip report from Windermere, the town of Windermere this time, exploring things to do and the areas to explore around Windermere, and all the usual features, news, events, and the answer to your questions of the month. See you next time.